In this video, we're going to talk about the stimulus package update for September the 16th. Now, we're not talking about something from the Democrats. We're not talking about something for Republicans. This is actually coming from the Problem Solvers Caucus. And they have something that I have not seen before that's extremely interesting. But before we get into it, if this is your first time at our channel or you haven't subscribed, click on the subscribe button at the bottom. My name is Travis Sickle, certified financial planner, helping you reach your financial goals. So I'm going to pull up the proposal, walk you through it in just a second. But before I do, the Senate is supposed to be in session until October the 9th and the House until October the 2nd. So we have some time for them to actually get to a deal. For this caucus that I'm going to talk about, the Problem Solvers Caucus, apparently they've been working on this for about 6 weeks and they just rolled out a plan or a proposal that has bipartisan support. So there are 50 plus members on this caucus and they're made up of Democrats and Republicans. So it's bipartisan support. So support from both sides coming together, trying to figure out and work on an agreement. Now, who's not on that board? Pelosi and Mitch McConnell. Thank goodness, because apparently they can't agree on much. Now, there are 3 points that are still in disagreement. We have unemployment being one. Is it 300? Is it 600? What is it? They can't figure it out. They can't come to an agreement. Number 2 is state and local funding. Pelosi wants it. The Republicans do not. And number 3 is the liability protection. And this is what Pelosi is calling the poison pill. So I talked about this on a previous video, the poison pills everywhere, and that is the liability protections. But it's not just liability protections for small businesses. This is also for the healthcare system. The entire healthcare system is open to tremendous liability, and this might help kind of eliminate that or reduce it. So the bipartisan bill that I'm about to go through also has a bit about that, and it makes a lot of sense to a degree. We'll see. So I'm going to pull it up on the screen and we're going to go through it together. So not only do they have a proposal, but it is actually organized with problem and solution. So everybody can understand this thing. I think they should roll this out for every single proposal moving forward because it would make life so much simpler. All right, getting on to it. Now I've highlighted what I thought or viewed as the most important points that you might want to look at. So the first thing that we're going to take a look at is this proposal is for the next 6 to 12 months. I actually didn't highlight that part. There we go. Next 6 to 12 months. The framework has been approved and endorsed by over 75% of the PSC members. Now remember, the PSC members are made up of Democrats and Republicans. So what this is saying is there is bipartisan support for this proposal. And it's consisting of 25 House Democrats and 25 House Republicans. Okay, so on the second page, everything is going to be listed just like this. And I'm going to put a link in the description at the bottom. So if you want to go through each one of these problems, you can either hit the pause button or just click on the link in the description at the bottom and I'll link right up to this PDF. So the first problem is they're looking at testing and healthcare. So this is the testing and tracing that you hear Pelosi say quite a bit. And they're going to put $100 billion towards this. So you can see the breakdown, $25 billion towards testing and contact tracing, $30 billion for the telehealth and other things, and then the $45 billion for Medicare loans to providers. Now, I'm not certain exactly what that is. It sounds pretty self-explanatory, but the Medicare loans to providers, I wasn't really sure what that all entails, but $45 billion is going towards that. So $100 billion in total for testing and healthcare. Now, the second page is looking at the support for individuals and families. That's $316 billion. You can see my highlights right there. I have the $1,200 stimulus check. So this is still bipartisan support on getting those stimulus checks. And it's an additional $500 per child, or in this case, a child and a dependent. And this is expanding that $500 from the first stimulus check to children and dependents. And you can see it says right there, dependent adults. And then we have rental assistance and student loan forbearance through December 31st, 2020. Now, not to say that the WIC and the SNAP programs aren't also important, because they are. I just didn't highlight it because that wasn't a topic that we've gone over in the past. Now, going on to the next page, we have unemployment assistance. Now, this one's interesting. So it's going to start with a $450 per week for 8 weeks as a transitional period. But look at this. I highlighted over here. It says followed up by an additional $600 per week and up to, but not exceeding 100% of the previous wage. So that really does sound like bipartisan support. The Republicans wanted to make sure that people weren't incentivized to stay out of work at home. And the Democrats wanted to give everyone $600. So to kind of find that happy medium, $450, because right now we're at $300 versus $600. So $450 right in the middle, but it'll bump up to $600 for those that can't find work, can't get back to work, still on unemployment, but after the fact. And it cannot go above 100% of what they previously earned. Now that still is going to have some technical issues because each state has to figure that out, but I don't really know why that should be that big of a deal because most states, as far as I understand, from unemployment are already doing this, and it's based on how much you earned previously. So most states are already doing this. So the next part we're going to look at is small businesses and nonprofits. Now this is looking at the PPP, and look at that, the EIDL program. Now this didn't say the EIDL advance, it says the EIDL. So it's getting an additional $50 billion for EIDL, and you can see that first line at $240 billion for the PPP as a second round. So that is very interesting with the EIDL because it is written as a second EIDL as well, because you can see the bullets are basically indented here. So it's saying the second loan, flexible use, full transparency, simplified forgiveness, prioritized I mean, that has everything in it. Simplified forgiveness. I'm sure a ton of small business owners are really excited about the simplified forgiveness because the first application for forgiveness was a lot more than most people wanted to deal with. And then they have the easy app, but it looks like they want to move to an even simpler way of administering this. And then the next page, we have schools and childcare. And I highlighted it right there, $100 billion for K through 12 schools for virtual, hybrid, and or in-person learning. So what that means to me is that means choice. That's saying that if you're online and virtual, we want to provide support. But if you're going back to a physical school, the physical building, in-person classrooms, then we also want to support those means, which I like that choice, to give choice about what you want to do with your kids. Now I'm in Tampa and we have the option of doing online learning or sending our kids back to school, which I think is the right thing to do to give both sides a choice if you want to send your kids to school or do the online learning. And then there's the third one for hybrid. So that is sending their kids to school for just a couple days a week to limit exposure. So there's really, it's not a one size fits all program. It's really catering to how parents and teachers want to teach their kids. And here is the state and local aid for $500 billion, $500 billion for state and local funding. But I highlighted documented everywhere. And this will probably, or the reason why it's getting bipartisan support, because the big issue with giving additional state and local funding that was coming from the Republicans is that the Democrats wanted to funnel this money, or attempting to funnel this money, to repair the cities that were damaged by all the chaos that's going on around the country in primarily or predominantly Democrat-run cities. And this, making it documented, would bring that bipartisan support to saying that, listen, we want to give the state and local governments money, but it has to be used for the coronavirus. And that is what I'm reading here, because that's what it's saying. It's saying for local COVID expenses. It says it again, COVID expenses. Now over here, it says local general revenue shortfalls, but again, also documented to figure out how they're actually spending this money, that it's not just going to the improvement of their state or the repair of their state, or something that most people would agree is not COVID-19 pandemic related. And then we have the election aid at $400 million for an election, for the election cost. That works out to about $1.25 per person. Now that doesn't seem like a lot, but that adds up quickly to $400 million. If you divide it, 400 million by 328 million, it's roughly $1.21, I think it comes out to be. Hopefully that gets the job done. Hopefully both sides can agree that this is going to be run successfully. but 400 million for the election. And then this one's a strange one to me. The Broadband, Agricultural, and USPS and Census, kind of just a smorgasbord of things for 52 billion. So they're going to give the 52 billion to the USPS, and that's been a hot topic for the last several weeks given the election. So that's why I highlighted it. And then the other strange one, I didn't highlight it, but it is a little strange to me. For the 12 billion for hotspots, highlighted right there. 12 billion for broadband hotspots. I don't really know why in underserved communities. I don't know what it has to do with the pandemic or why they're trying to push for a lot of money for broadband in hotspots. I don't know. But that's what they're doing. They're doing 52 billion for this smorgasbord of a page. And then this is another hot topic for House Speaker Pelosi with the liability protections and her calling it the poison pill. But I guess the happy medium here is that they're going to link the liability protections to whatever gets outlined with OSHA or OSHA guidelines. So I guess they're going to leave it to OSHA to say these are the set guidelines that you have to abide by in order to get these liability protections. I don't know how great that's going to be across the board, because whenever you have more regulations to meet a certain standard from a government standpoint, it usually creates problems for the healthcare industry and manufacturing and small businesses. Basically, everybody that's involved with OSHA would say that it's a lot more work than it is reward or doing things correctly. But the intent is to prevent and stop frivolous lawsuits. And you can see it right there, frivolous lawsuits. That is what it's trying to accomplish. It's probably a lot more difficult to implement than just simply saying that nobody can sue anybody. But that would mean that nobody can sue anybody, but you want to make sure that things are done correctly so the pandemic can actually stop someday. So this is what they're trying to do. And then this page right here was what's interesting to me, that no other proposal or stimulus package has had a part where there's two sides to it. If things go well, then we can do a reducer where we don't need as much aid. And if things need a little bit more money, then we can do a booster. So they have the boosters and reducers, which I think is really smart. And I'm surprised that nobody has introduced this earlier, especially if they've been talking about this for 6 weeks. So I don't know when obviously they came to the conclusion they should have boosters and reducers, but they're giving it certain metrics, and those aren't clear on what those metrics actually are. But it's the boosters clearly is based on COVID hospitalization metrics and vaccine progress. So if that doesn't occur, they're going to give an additional 400 billion. And if things start to go our way, then they'll do a reducer. Well, they'll take away 200 billion from aid, and they'll reduce it by 60 billion with the PPP, reduce it with state and local funding by 130 billion, and rental assistance by 10 billion. And then this final page right here with the cost breakdown, it couldn't have been simpler. So they want to introduce $1.5 trillion in this plan, but it could go as high as an additional 400 billion, or it can go down by 200 billion. And we have this extra 130 billion. And I think a chunk of that, or most of it, came from the unallocated PPP funds. So that could be rolled over moving forward. But it can go either way. And that's the part that I love most about this plan. So hopefully they can figure out how to incorporate this bipartisan support from the problem solvers caucus. I don't know where they've been all year, but I'm glad they showed up. And that is your update for the stimulus package for September the 16th. If you've enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and leave your comments down at the bottom.